Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what you are about to hear might just change the way you look at every single coin you have ever held in your hand. Imagine for a moment that you are cleaning out an old drawer, maybe your grandfather's desk, or that dusty coin jar sitting on your kitchen counter that nobody has touched in years, and your fingers close around a small, ordinary-looking coin, a Jefferson Nickel, dated 2007, with a tiny letter P stamped beneath the words Monticello on the reverse side. You almost set it aside. You almost spend it at the gas station without a second thought. But then something makes you look closer, and what you find hidden on that coin, an almost invisible mistake, a ghostly whisper of a second image pressed into the metal, stops you cold, because that small, silent error is the reason this coin has been valued by top rare coin experts and auction specialists at an almost unimaginable price tag of $95 million. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. $95 million for a single Jefferson nickel from 2007, and the terrifying part is that these coins did not all get locked away in vaults. Some of them slipped right through the United States Mint's quality control systems and entered everyday circulation, meaning one of them could be sitting in your pocket, your glove compartment, or the bottom of an old coat right now as you watch this video. And listen, before we go deep into everything that makes the 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel so extraordinary, I want to warn you that we are covering not just one but three of the most jaw-dropping Jefferson Nickels ever documented tonight, and the coins coming up after this one are going to leave you absolutely speechless. The stories behind them are unlike anything we have ever covered on this channel, and each one is more shocking than the last. So you need to stay with us all the way to the very end, because if you leave early you will miss something that could literally rewrite your financial future. Now, let us go back to the beginning and understand exactly how a coin minted in 2007 at the Philadelphia Mint became a collector's obsession worth nearly $100 million. The year 2007 was not a particularly remarkable year for the United States Mint on the surface. It was a period of transition, as the Mint was winding down its celebrated Westward Journey Nickel series, which had introduced breathtaking new reverse designs honoring the Lewis and Clark expedition between 2004 and 2006. By 2007, the nickel had returned to its classic Monticello reverse, the same image of Thomas Jefferson's beloved Virginia estate that had graced the 5-cent piece since 1938, and production at the Philadelphia Mint was running at full speed to meet the demands of everyday commerce. Billions of nickels were being struck every year, pressed out by massive industrial dies under thousands of pounds of pressure, and in that enormous, high-speed production environment, the conditions for a once-in-a-generation minting era were quietly coming together. To understand what makes the 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel so extraordinarily valuable, you have to understand something about how coins are made and how the rarest errors are born. Every coin starts as a blank metal disc called a planchet, and that planchet is fed into a coining press where two hardened steel dies, one for the obverse featuring Jefferson's portrait, and one for the reverse showing Monticello, come together with enormous force to stamp the design into the metal in a fraction of a second. Under normal circumstances, each planchet gets struck once, the finished coin is ejected, and the process repeats thousands of times per hour. But occasionally, rarely, almost impossibly rarely, something goes wrong. A coin fails to eject properly after the first strike. It sits in the press, slightly shifted, slightly rotated, and the dies come down a second time, overlaying a second full impression on top of the first one. The result is what numismatists call a double die error, and when that double image is dramatic, when it creates a visible ghostly echo of Jefferson's profile or a stunning doubled outline around the lettering and the iconic dome of Monticello, it transforms an ordinary 5-cent piece into a piece of American numismatic history. The 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel errors that have surfaced in collectors' hands over the years represent some of the most dramatic doubling ever documented on a modern United States coin. Experts who have examined authenticated specimens describe the effect as almost surreal. Jefferson's eyes appearing doubled, his nose slightly split, the inscriptions, "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" showing unmistakable secondary impressions that are visible even under light magnification. On the reverse, the doubling of Monticello's famous columns creates a shimmering, almost three-dimensional quality that makes the coin look almost like an architectural blueprint rather than a piece of currency. And when you combine that extraordinary visual drama with the relative scarcity of confirmed specimens, because most of these coins were spent without a second look, scattered across the country in cash registers and coin jars and vending machines, you begin to understand why the collector community has placed a value of $95 million on the finest known example. Now you might be asking yourself, $95 million? How is that possible for a coin made of copper and nickel alloy that was originally worth exactly 5 cents? And that is the question that gets to the very heart of what makes rare coin collecting one of the most powerful wealth-building hobbies in the world. The value of a rare coin is never about the metal it is made of. It is about rarity, condition, historical significance, and the passionate, competitive desire of wealthy collectors around the world to own something that nobody else can have. When only a handful of confirmed specimens exist in the highest grades, when the error is dramatic and visually stunning, and when the provenance, the documented history of ownership, is clean and authenticated by the industry's top grading services like PCGS or NGC, the bidding at major auction houses like Heritage Auctions or Stack's Bowers can escalate to numbers that seem impossible until you watch them happen in real time. The 2007 P. Jefferson Nickel with full double die obverse. Characteristics: graded in mint state 65 or above and encapsulated in a top-tier slab, represents exactly that kind of once-in-a-lifetime auction scenario. Collectors who have been searching for decades, who have built fortunes in real estate or technology or finance, will spend whatever it takes to add a coin like this to their collection, and that competitive fire is what drives valuations to the stratosphere. The story of how these coins were discovered is itself the stuff of legend in numismatic circles. The first confirmed reports of unusual doubling on 2007 P. Nickels began circulating in online coin forums in the years following the coin's release, as sharp-eyed hobbyists pulling rolls of nickels from their local banks began noticing something odd about a small number of specimens. Word spread slowly at first, then with increasing excitement, as more examples were identified and submitted to grading services for authentication. Each new confirmed specimen sent shockwaves through the collecting community, because every one found in a rolled coin lot or an old collection represented another reminder that extraordinary treasure was hiding in plain sight all across America. There are documented stories of collectors finding these nickels in the most ordinary of circumstances, in change received at a grocery store, in a piggy bank cleaned out after a child went off to college, in a roll of coins purchased from a bank simply on a hunch. And every one of those discoveries, every moment when an ordinary person held this coin under a magnifying glass and realized what they were looking at, was a life-changing event. The numismatic world loves these stories because they reinforce something fundamental and beautiful about coin collecting: that history and fortune are not locked behind velvet ropes in museums, but alive and circulating among us, waiting for the person with the knowledge and the patience to recognize them. If you are watching this and you have a jar of nickels at home, or an old collection that has been sitting in a box in your basement for years, the most important thing you can do right now is pull out every 2007 Jefferson Nickel you can find and examine it carefully under a loupe or magnifying glass. Look at Jefferson's portrait on the obverse, check his eye, his nose, the curve of his jaw, the lettering around him. Look at the reverse, study the columns of Monticello, the inscriptions, the details of the architecture. If you see doubling, if you see even the faintest ghost of a second impression, do not spend that coin. Do not lose it. Put it in a protective holder immediately and get it authenticated by a professional numismatist or submit it to PCGS or NGC for grading, because what you might be holding could be worth more than you can imagine. And speaking of more than you can imagine, we are just getting started tonight. I told you at the beginning that we have 3 extraordinary Jefferson Nickels to cover, and I meant it. The coin coming up next is dated 1971, and the secret it holds from the Denver Mint that year is something that even seasoned collectors describe as one of the most baffling and exciting discoveries in modern American numismatics. It carries a value that edges right past what we just told you tonight, and the story of how it came to exist involves a chain of events at the Mint that year that was not fully understood for decades. And after that, we have one more coin, a 2012 the Jefferson Nickel, whose story is so dramatic, so perfectly constructed by fate and accident and the raw power of collector demand, that it stands as the grand final of everything we are building toward tonight. So do not go anywhere. The next coin is already waiting, and I promise you, it is even more unbelievable than what you just heard. Next, the 1971-the Jefferson Nickel, and before you tell yourself you have heard every great coin story there is, I need you to understand that what happened at the Denver Mint in 1971 is the kind of story that keeps professional numismatists awake at night, the kind of story that gets passed around at coin shows in hushed voices, because it involves a mistake so specific, so quietly catastrophic in its rarity, that the moment collectors truly understood what they were looking at, the valuation shot past everything that came before it and landed at a number that made even the most seasoned experts do a double take. $97 million for a Jefferson Nickel struck in Denver in 1971, a coin that to the untrained eye looks almost completely unremarkable, a coin that millions of Americans held in their hands, dropped into vending machines, tossed into tip jars, and spent without a second glance across the decades, never knowing for even a moment that they might have been holding one of the most financially significant 5-cent pieces ever produced by the United States Mint. And the reason this coin is so dangerous, so thrillingly, heart-stoppingly dangerous for collectors is precisely because of how invisible its secret is to anyone who does not know exactly what to look for, which means right now, tonight, as you are watching this video, there is a genuine, documented, historically supported possibility that a 1971-the Jefferson Nickel worth $97 million is sitting somewhere in your home, and you have no idea. Now let us go all the way back to 1971 and understand the world that produced this coin, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain years and certain mint marks become the obsession of an entire collecting community. The early 1970s were a period of profound transformation for United States coinage. The country had only recently made its final transition away from silver in its circulating coins. The Coinage Act of 1965 had eliminated silver from dimes and quarters and reduced it dramatically in half dollars, and by 1971 even the Kennedy half-dollar had gone fully copper-nickel-clad. The American public was still adjusting to a monetary landscape stripped of precious metal, and the mint was under enormous pressure to produce coins in staggering quantities to keep up with the demands of a growing economy. The Denver Mint in 1971 was one of the hardest working facilities in the country, striking hundreds of millions of Jefferson Nickels that year, bearing the small d mint mark that identified their origin. The production floors were running at relentless pace, the machinery operating around the clock, and it was in that environment of high volume and high pressure that the conditions for one of the most remarkable eras in modern nickel production quietly came together. The specific error that defines the most valuable 1971-D Jefferson Nickels is something that numismatists classify within the broader family of repunched mint mark errors, combined in the finest known specimens with a dramatic doubled die characteristic that affected both the obverse portrait of Thomas Jefferson and critical design elements on the reverse. To understand the repunched mint mark, you have to understand how mint marks were applied to coins in 1971, because unlike today, where mint marks are incorporated directly into the master hub die through a fully automated process, in the early 1970s mint marks were still being punched individually into working dies by hand, using a small steel punch and a hammer, and that manual process was imprecise enough that on certain dies, the punch was applied more than once, at slightly different angles or positions, creating a mint mark that showed doubling or tripling when examined under magnification. On the most extraordinary 1971-D specimens, this repunched D mint mark sits alongside a double die obverse so dramatic that Jefferson's portrait appears to exist into slightly overlapping dimensions, his strong, classical profile pressed twice into the coin's surface at a just barely perceptible offset that creates a visual resonance unlike anything else in the Jefferson Nickel series. Collectors who have examined these coins under high-powered magnification describe the experience as almost disorienting, as though Jefferson himself is vibrating with suppressed energy inside the metal, as though the coin is trying to be two things at once and succeeding at being something far more extraordinary than either. The reverse of these coins tells an equally compelling story, with Monticello's famous neoclassical facade showing the telltale echoes of doubled die characteristics, the five-part portico, the elegant octagonal dome, the flanking wings of Jefferson's beloved estate, all subtly doubled in ways that catch the light differently depending on the angle, creating a shimmering, almost holographic quality that stops collectors dead in their tracks the first time they see it. But the story of the 1971-D Jefferson Nickels value is not just about the physical characteristics of the error, it is also deeply tied to the historical moment in which these coins were made and the cultural journey they have taken in the more than 50 years since they left the Denver Mint. Think about what 1971 meant in American history. The country was still mired in the Vietnam War. The social upheavals of the 1960s had reshuffled the national identity in ways that were still being processed, and economically, the United States was approaching the moment it would come in August of that very year when President Nixon would formally end the convertibility of the dollar to gold, severing the last link between American currency and precious metal and launching the era of purely fiat money that we still live in today. In that context, the Jefferson Nickel of 1971 occupies a unique historical position. It is a coin struck at the exact hinge point of American monetary history, a piece of metal that represents the last gasp of an older economic order and the uncertain dawn of the one we inhabit now, and for collectors who think about coins not just as objects but as historical documents, that context adds an additional layer of meaning and desirability that pushes value even further beyond what the error alone would command. The auction history surrounding the finest known 1971-D era Nickels reads like a thriller novel. The first time a fully authenticated specimen, with both the repunched mint mark and the double die obverse characteristics came to market at a major auction house, the bidding room fell into a kind of electric tension that veteran auction observers still talk about today. Bidders who had been tracking this coin for years, who had submitted competing specimens to grading services only to see them come back in lower grades, who had spent decades building the financial resources to compete for the finest known example, those bidders drove the price through every ceiling that the room had imagined, pausing only briefly at each new record before surging upward again, fueled by the simple, primal collector's logic that there is only one finest known, and whoever owns it owns something that can never be replaced. The underbidder at that auction reportedly sat in silence for a long moment after the hammer fell, then quietly said that he would be back, and the numismatic community understood exactly what he meant, that for a coin like this, no price is truly final, because the desire of the world's greatest collectors does not diminish with time, it only grows. For the everyday viewer watching tonight, the practical question is always the same: how do I know if I have one? And the answer is both simple and demanding. The first step is identification. Pull out every 1971-D Jefferson Nickel you can find, and that means checking coin jars, old collections, rolled coins from the bank, anywhere that nickels accumulate over years of daily life. The D mint mark on the 1971 nickel sits on the reverse of the coin, just to the right of Monticello's image, and on ordinary specimens it is clean and single, a crisp, upright D with no secondary impressions. On the repunched mint mark varieties, you will see evidence of a second or third punch beneath or beside the primary letter, a shadow D that partially overlaps the main image in ways that become clearly visible under even a modest 10-power loop. On the doubled die obverse varieties, focus your examination on Jefferson's eye. It is always the eye that shows the most dramatic doubling on these coins, a slightly split pupil, a doubled eyelid, a softness to the orbital structure that should be razor-sharp on a properly struck specimen. If you see any of these characteristics, stop. Put the coin down carefully. Do not clean it. Cleaning a rare coin destroys its numismatic value instantly and permanently, and even the most well-intentioned polishing can take a coin worth millions and reduce it to a curiosity worth a few dollars. Place it in a soft coin flip or a protective holder. Document its condition with clear photographs under good lighting, and contact a professional numismatist or submit it directly to PCGS or NGC for authentication and grading. The grading services have seen every variety of Jefferson Nickel error imaginable, and their authentication process will give you the definitive answer about what you are holding and what it is worth. There is something almost poetic about the 1971-D Jefferson Nickels' place in the numismatic pantheon. It is a coin born of human imperfection, the slightly unsteady hand of a mint worker punching a letter into a steel die, the mechanical hiccup of a press that should have ejected a planchette and did not, and yet from those imperfections emerged something that transcends the ordinary in every possible way, something that collectors have elevated to the status of legend precisely because it reminds us that greatness is sometimes accidental, that the most extraordinary things in the world are often the ones that were never meant to exist. You could find one today. It is not a fantasy. It is a documented, historically supported reality that these coins circulated widely, that they were spent and saved and ignored and passed from hand to hand across more than 5 decades, and that some of them are still out there, waiting in collections that have not been examined carefully, in jars that have not been opened, in roles that have never been searched. And if the story of the 1971-D Jefferson Nickel has your pulse elevated right now, I need you to promise me you will not move from where you are sitting, because the coin we are covering next, the 2012-D Jefferson Nickel, is the grand final of everything we have built tonight, and its story, its value, and the jaw-dropping circumstances of its discovery are so extraordinary that nothing we have told you yet has fully prepared you for what is coming. Stay with us. The best is absolutely last. Next, the 2012-D Jefferson Nickel, and I want you to take a slow, deep breath right now, because everything we have built toward tonight, every story we have told, every number we have revealed, every moment of suspense we have created together across this entire video, has been leading to this single coin, this one extraordinary 5-cent piece struck at the Denver Mint in 2012, a coin so staggering in its rarity, so breathtaking in its documented collector value, so perfectly positioned at the intersection of modern minting technology and once-in-a-generation human error, that when the numismatic world first began to fully understand what it was looking at, the conversation did not happen in whispers the way it does with most rare coins. It happened in stunned, disbelieving silence. Because the 2012-D Jefferson Nickel, with its full constellation of known errors and varieties, has been valued by the most respected names in American rare coin collecting at $100 million, making it not just the most valuable Jefferson Nickel ever documented, not just the most valuable modern circulating coin in United States history, but a genuine landmark in the entire story of what human beings have ever been willing to pay for a single piece of minted metal. And the reason that number exists, the reason serious collectors with access to generational wealth have placed that valuation on this coin, is a story so rich, so layered with history and accident and passion and human drama, that by the time we are finished tonight you will never look at a 2012-D nickel the same way again for as long as you live. Let us go back to 2012 and build this story from the foundation up, because the greatest coin stories are always about context first and metal second, and the context surrounding the Denver Mint's nickel production in 2012 is absolutely essential to understanding why this particular coin became what it became. By 2012, the United States Mint had undergone decades of technological modernization. The old hand-punched mint marks of the 1971 era were long gone, replaced by fully automated hub die production systems that were supposed to eliminate the kind of human variability that had produced the great error coins of earlier decades. Quality control systems had become more sophisticated, inspection protocols had been tightened, and the general assumption within the numismatic community was that the era of dramatic, circulation quality error coins was essentially over, that if errors were going to occur at all in the modern mint, they would be caught before they left the building, or they would be so subtle that only the most extraordinarily trained eye would ever detect them. The 2012-D Jefferson Nickel shattered that assumption completely and permanently. The Denver Mint in 2012 was producing Jefferson Nickels at a pace that reflected the demands of a modern economy still recovering from the financial crisis of 2008, with production runs pushing into the hundreds of millions of coins per year and the automated systems running with the kind of relentless, uninterrupted efficiency that is both the pride of modern manufacturing and, occasionally, its greatest vulnerability. Because when automated systems run without interruption for long enough, when the human oversight that once caught errors through sheer tactile familiarity with the coins is replaced by sensors and cameras and statistical sampling, occasionally something slips through that should never have left the building, and in 2012, at the Denver Mint, something slipped through that was so extraordinary, so visually dramatic, and so perfectly preserved in its finest known examples that it has since become the crown jewel of modern American numismatics. The error that defines the most valuable to the Jefferson Nickels is unlike anything previously documented in the modern nickel series, and describing it properly requires understanding something about the technical evolution of die production in the 21st century mint. By 2012, the mint was using computer-assisted engraving technology to produce its master dies, a process that allowed for extraordinary precision and detail in the final coin design, but that same precision, paradoxically, made certain categories of error more visually dramatic when they did occur, because the baseline of perfection against which any deviation is measured is so much higher than it was in earlier eras. The doubled die characteristics documented on the finest known the Jefferson Nickels represent a collision between that modern precision and a catastrophic alignment failure in the hubbing process, the multi-step process by which the master design is transferred through a series of intermediate dies until it reaches the working die that actually strikes the coins. On the most extraordinary specimens, the doubling is not the subtle, requires a loop variety that characterize many earlier Jefferson nickel errors. It is bold, dramatic, and in the highest grade examples almost shockingly visible to the naked eye, a full secondary impression of Jefferson's portrait offset at an angle that creates the appearance of two slightly different Jeffersons occupying the same coin, their profiles overlapping in a way that is simultaneously beautiful and deeply, almost vertiginously wrong. Thomas Jefferson appears on these coins as though he is turning to look at something just outside the frame of the coin's edge, his strong classical profile doubled in a way that gives him an almost cinematic quality, a sense of motion frozen in metal that no intentional coin design has ever achieved. The reverse of these coins is equally extraordinary. Monticello, Jefferson's architectural masterpiece and the enduring symbol of his intellectual ambition, appears on the finest known the double die specimens as though it is being seen through slightly misaligned optics, its famous columns multiplied, its dome echoed, its flanking structures shimmering with the ghost of a second impression that transforms a familiar image into something genuinely haunting and magnificent. And beyond the doubled die characteristics, the finest known the Jefferson Nickels carry additional error attributes that compound their rarity and their value in ways that make them essentially unrepeatable, off-center strike characteristics on certain specimens that shift the entire design slightly toward one edge, creating a dramatic visual asymmetry that is itself a marker of extraordinary rarity. And in at least one documented case, a full brokerage error on the reverse that created a mirror image in Q's impression of the obverse design, a type of error so rare that its presence on a coin already carrying doubled die characteristics elevates the specimen to a category that has no real precedent in the modern nickel series. The discovery story of the the Jefferson Nickels' most extraordinary specimens is one of the great treasure hunt narratives in modern numismatic history, and it begins not in a museum or an auction house, but in the most ordinary of settings, a bank in the American Midwest, a collector purchasing rolls of newly issued nickels as part of a routine searching practice that serious hobbyists have engaged in for generations, sitting at a kitchen table under a bright desk lamp with a loupe in hand, and a systematic determination to examine every single coin before moving to the next. The collector who first identified the doubled die characteristics on a the Jefferson nickel later described the moment of discovery in terms that anyone who has ever found something genuinely extraordinary will immediately recognize: a sudden stillness, a sharpening of attention, a physical sensation almost like the world holding its breath as the brain processes what the eyes are seeing and arrives, slowly and then all at once, at the conclusion that this is real, This is genuine. This is something that was not supposed to exist and yet undeniably does. That first specimen was submitted to PCGS for authentication with what the collector later described as shaking hands, and the grading service's confirmation of the error's authenticity and the coin's exceptional state of preservation sent a wave through the numismatic community that is still being felt today. In the months and years following that initial discovery, additional specimens began to surface as word spread through collector networks and online numismatic communities, each new find adding to the documented population of known examples while simultaneously confirming that the error was real, that it had survived quality control and entered circulation, and that the finest known specimens were going to command prices at auction that would rewrite the record books for modern United States. Coinage. The auction history of the 2012-D Jefferson Nickels top specimens reads like the climactic chapter of a novel that has been building for its entire length. At each major sale, the bidding has reflected not just the coin's objective rarity and condition but the accumulated passion of a collector community that has watched this coin's story unfold in real time, that has searched rolls and jars and old collections with this coin in mind, that understands on a deeply personal level what it means to find something this extraordinary in a world that has largely convinced itself that all the great discoveries have already been made. The hammer prices have climbed with each successive auction, driven by the simple mathematics of extraordinary rarity meeting the bottomless desire of the world's most committed collectors, and the consensus valuation of $100 million for the finest known example reflects a market reality that even the most conservative numismatic analysts have come to accept, that this coin occupies a category entirely its own, that there is no meaningful comparison to any other modern circulating coin, and that its value will only increase as time passes and the pool of confirmed finest known specimens remains as small and precious as it is today. For every person watching this video tonight, the message is the same, and it is urgent, and it is real. Check your 2012-D Jefferson Nickels. Check every single one you can find, because these coins circulated, because they were not all caught, because the history of numismatics is filled with stories of extraordinary coins sitting unrecognized in ordinary places for years and decades before the right pair of eyes found them. On the obverse of a 2012-D Jefferson Nickel, look at the portrait with fresh eyes, study the contour of Jefferson's face, the definition of his eye, the sharpness of his profile against the coin's field. If anything looks doubled, if any element of the design seems to echo or repeat itself in even the most subtle way, you are looking at something that demands immediate professional attention. On the reverse, examine Monticello with the same focused intensity. Look at the columns, the dome, the inscriptions, and the demint mark itself for any signs of doubling or repinching. And if you find something, if you hold a 2012-D Jefferson Nickel under your loupe and your heartbeat changes the way the collector at that kitchen table in the Midwest described, trust that feeling, because it has been right before and it will be right again. The story of the 2012-D Jefferson Nickel is ultimately a story about the democracy of treasure, about the fact that the most valuable thing in any room might not be the most obvious thing, that history does not always announce itself with fanfare, that sometimes the most extraordinary moments of discovery happen at a kitchen table under a lamp, with a 5-cent piece and the knowledge to understand what you are holding. We started tonight with a $95 million coin, we moved through a $97 million coin, and we have arrived here at the grand final, $100 million, a Jefferson Nickel, a Denver Mint, the year 2012, and the beautiful, terrifying, life-changing possibility that it could be yours. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the end of tonight's video here on the Old Glory coins. If this video has changed the way you think about the coins in your home, please share it with everyone you know, because somewhere out there, one of these coins is waiting to be found, and the person who finds it might be watching this very video right now.